Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. Thanks for taking time out of your busy day to join us. I'd like to welcome you to the final session of our Compliance is Never Enough series. Today, our topic is going to be secure software development. Let's just go over a couple of things before we dive into our discussion. All attendees will be muted throughout the session, but we do encourage you to ask questions using the Q&A feature. You can send those in throughout the hour, and we will be monitoring those. This session is being recorded, and all attendees will be receiving a link to the recording, as well as a copy of the slides following the presentation. You can look for those in your inbox tomorrow. And if you've been following this series, you know that all previous sessions will be added into our webinar library located on our website. So just a little bit of background info before we get started. Kirkpatrick Price is a PCI QSA and a licensed CPA firm providing assurance services to clients worldwide. Our firm has over 11 years of experience in information assurance by performing assessments, audits, and tests that strengthen information security and compliance controls. We offer both regulatory compliance and information security services. We provide consulting services such as policy and procedure drafting, risk assessment, internal audit plan and development, and readiness audits. We also provide guidance and audit services on frameworks such as HIPAA, SOC 1 and SOC 2, PCI, FISMA, and ISO 27001. And we've actually just added a new service. We are an authorized high-trust CSF assessor. So if you're interested in those services, please contact us. We also encourage you to connect with us by subscribing to our blog, visiting our library of recorded webinars, and following us on LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook so you can see all the important updates we give through social media. And now I'd like to welcome our speaker for today, Jeff Wilder. Jeff is the Director of PCI Services here at Kirkpatrick Price. Prior to KP, Jeff was a trainer for the PCI Security Standards Council, where he educated individuals on how to become QSAs. Jeff holds a ton of certifications, and I'm not even going to try to pronounce them all. So let's welcome Jeff.
Good morning. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Jenna. That was very nice of you. So yeah, I want to first of all kind of thank everybody for spending part of your afternoon with us. I want to talk a little bit about what this series is for those of you that haven't been following it. We spend a lot of time with our clients and trying to help them to understand, that it's not just important that the organization that you work with maintains compliance, but it's really more about maintaining security. Here at Kirkpatrick Price, we have the thought process that it's best to maintain a secure state because, if you're secure, it doesn't really matter how you measure yourself, right? You're always typically going to be compliant. But what we find is that organizations that try to focus on being compliant, chances are they're really never not secure. That's double negative. Their chances are they're not secure, nor are they compliant as well. And so we put this series together to talk about some of the high-level things that you as an organization need to consider around, being secure and not just being compliant. And so what we've done is we've taken a couple of these topics, software development, we talked about encryption, we talked about patch management, we talked about firewall router management. We talked about a few of these things and kind of took a little bit deeper dive than just talking about any specific standard and to try to provide you some guidance about why it's important that we do these things, more so than just, the checkbox compliance. So in this particular presentation, we're going to spend some time in talking about, really what is a software development lifecycle. I find that when we work with a lot of organizations, we'll say, give us your SDLC, give us your software development lifecycle. Could you please provide that to us? And it becomes very evident pretty quick that they themselves really don't have a good concept or good understanding of what an SDLC really is. So we're going to spend a little bit of time to talk about what is an SDLC. We're going to talk about what are the merits that a good SDLC is going to have. What are the things that you should be looking for, or what are the things that you should be including, right? And we're going to spend a little bit of time in talking about when we're assessing, an SDLC, what are the things that we need to look at from an assessment perspective? And when you're assessing your SDLC, what are those things that we need to, that you should be looking for during that process? All right, if we could go ahead and move forward. So let's start off by talking about what an SDLC is. I'm not going to sit here and read off the bullet points here. These will be for your reference at a later time. But effectively, an SDLC is a combination of multiple things. It is a policy, it is a procedure that defines how your organization is going to develop software, right? And it's going to provide not necessarily the intricate step-by-step tasks, but at least at a minimum, here are the things that happen during these phases of the development. Now, when we look at really any security framework and that talks about SDLC, one of the things that we look for is that organizations include security throughout the entire SDLC. And so we're going to spend a little bit of time in talking about the different phases within an SDLC. And the different phases within the SDLC are irrespective of the framework that you're actually using to develop. So this particular presentation will spend some time in talking about the clearly distinctive work phases that you have within your software development lifecycle. Okay, let's go ahead and move forward. So an SDLC is really about maintaining the secure environment that supports your business needs. And this is everything from, when we look at, the development life cycle. If you do not include security from the actual very inception of the product offering that you're going to be developing or developing against, chances are your organization is missing numerous things within that application that is required to keep it secure or to implement it in a secure environment. And just as a given example, in the beginning of we'll talk about this in detail in a few minutes, but at the beginning of your SDLC should always be your requirements phase. What are the things that we require during the requirements phase? And if you don't have logging called out within there, if you don't have application authentication requirements, chances are when that application goes into a production state, you may not have the necessary attributes covered. So we're going to talk about that. But really, maintaining a good SDLC is really about supporting a secure environment that really supports your business needs. Where those business needs come into play, those are your compliance frameworks, those are your regulatory compliance requirements, those are your contractual business requirements. So without having all of the necessary attributes defined within your framework, as an organization, you're going to be left with an application that typically is either you're going to spend a lot of energy and effort strapping security on the background, having to go rewrite the application to meet those things, or lastly, that just are implemented in such a way that they're not holistically secure. Okay, let's go and move forward. So an SDLC, a software development life cycle. Now, the life cycle is this iterative process that we use for defining how we develop software, and this is irrespective of whether you're using, JAD-RAD or using a Fountain or Waterfall or break-fix, whatever framework you're using, or and a lot of organizations we work with, we see that they're using an agile development process, and that very well may be the methodology that you're using for developing software. But an SDLC, understand, is really how we go about doing it and not necessarily the methodology for developing, okay? So I just want to make sure that you understand that when we talk about a methodology, the methodology is different than the SDLC. The SDLC is part of the methodology itself, but they're really two different things. One is the framework by which you develop software, and the other one is what are the things that we do within that framework. Okay, so let's go ahead and move forward. So the SDLC is really crucial regardless of the type of application. It's really crucial to ensure that you have all of the necessary attributes married within your framework. And it doesn't matter, like I said, whether we're using a waterfall or we're using JAD-RAD, we're using Agile. It really doesn't matter. What's really important is that within the SDLC, that your software developers and anybody else within the development lifecycle framework understand what needs to happen during this particular time of the application's life when it's in that particular phrase, right? And it's one of the most important things is to ensure that we capture all of the necessary things that need to be done in order to ensure that our application is being developed to meet those business needs, okay? So the other thing that we need to consider as part of this is that while you as an organization might be developing software in-house, if you have outsourced, right, your development, all of these things that we're talking about here are absolutely applicable and appropriate that you ask the third party that you might have developing your software for. It's going to be absolutely imperative that you ensure that from a contractual perspective that they're adhering to your SDLC. If you do not have an SDLC, right, that you contractually obligate them to have an SDLC and that it covers all of the things that we're going to be talking about. So we're not going to be focusing this presentation on, you know, how do we develop an SDLC for Agile. We're not going to be talking about how you develop the SDLC for a waterfall framework. What we're going to be talking about is the individual phases that we have within your SDLC that you need to ensure that you have integrated within your program and what some of those attributes might look like. Okay, let's go ahead and move forward. Okay. So as we kind of already talked about, an SDLC is policies, procedures, and standards. These are the things that we require, right, from an organizational perspective that define how we go about developing software. We want to develop it securely, so our policies are going to require that we map to some security framework. The procedures are going to define how do we develop secure software, and the standards are then going to be what we looked at for that framework. Okay, let's go ahead and move forward. So the first part of your software development lifecycle, regardless of what framework you're using, we always have the requirements phase, okay? Now, this is where we go to the business units, we go to our clients, we go to our customers and ask them, how do you want this particular application to function, right? What are the things that it needs to accomplish in order for it to be a successful program? Now, understand that as part of this, we want to make sure that we capture all of the business requirements. We want to make sure that we capture the technical requirements. We want to make sure that we capture the functional requirements and the user requirements. Now, during this requirements phases, we want to make sure that as part of the business, the technical, the functional, and the user requirements, that we also include the security requirements within there, right? We want to make sure that the application can be implemented into your environment and it function in a fully hardened system. We need to make sure that it'll operate, right, with your file integrity monitoring system, your logging systems, your authentication systems. All of those things that we expect to see within a hardened environment, you want to make sure that this application can be implemented and support those things, okay? So let's go ahead and move forward. Now, as part of this proposed system design, right, we work with the business unit and we say, how do we want this application to function, right? Like I've talked about, is we want to make sure that during this requirements phases, we've captured all of the components that need to be developed and everything that needs to be implemented in order for this application to function securely. Short of having these new system, these new applications functioning, short of missing those requirements, we're going to be left with an application that doesn't fully function in a hardened environment, right? So we're going to be wanting to make sure that as part of this, that we have all of the systems, need to be trained, or all of the individuals need to be trained. We have as part of the requirements and how to use the application securely. So understand that the entire SDLC is not just about development, it's about the life cycle of the application itself. It's the entire life cycle of the application. It's not just, okay, we've developed it. Now it's part of that life cycle is when it goes into production, and we'll be talking about that in a few minutes, right? So it's important to ensure that the application is functioning, can fully function in a hardened environment, and that's in every step of the life cycle of the application, everything from the requirements phase to the design phase to the development phase to testing, production, and then we also have end of life, and we'll be talking a little bit about that more in a minute, okay? So as part of the requirements phase, you're going to spend some time in working with the business environment and understanding how does this application need to function. Now, as part of this phase, understand that your security requirements are going to change over time, and as the application is developed and it's maintained, that might mean that you have to implement new features that in a legacy application didn't have before. So just be considerate of that, okay? Let's go ahead and move forward. So here are the typical phases of an SDLC, right? We have the planning, which is your requirements. We have the analysis, where we look at the application, and in this case where we have the analysis, right, we're looking for, does our current infrastructure, our current application meet our business needs? Whether it's a new, then that comes out to, do we need to develop a new application, or can the applications we have be altered, or do we just need to use what we currently have? So we have the planning analysis. Once your analysis phase is done is where we look for, from a security perspective, we look for the security review. Does the application, is it still a secured state? Will it still function in a secured environment? Once you've done that analysis, we look for the design phase, and we'll get into a little bit more of this in a moment, right? So we get into the design phase, and the design phase is where we actually use our standards to design the application. This is the development, this is the testing, and then from there it goes into the implementation. We need to make sure that the application has been fully implemented in a secure state, and then it goes into maintenance. So this is really an iterative cycle as part of the SDLC that your organization needs to look at and needs to ensure in order to make sure that your applications are fully, not only are implemented in a secure way, but they're maintained in a secure way. Understand that your applications, right, the security posture and the security threats change from time to time within the industry. So this particular life cycle should be something that you are always considering as part of your ongoing life cycle management of your applications, okay? Let's go ahead and move forward. All right, so a lot of times I'll come into an organization and I'll say, talk to me about your SDLC. And they'll say, well, we use OWASP, right, the Web Application Security Framework that's developed by the consortium of users out in the industry, right? And understand that OWASP is a security framework, right? OWASP is not a development lifecycle. So we need to make sure that we understand from an organization, right, what an SDLC is, and how that differs from, the CWE Top 25 or the OWASP. Now, as part of this particular slide here, I want to make sure that you understand that, being considerate of the OWASP or the CWE Top 25, all of those things that help you to develop a secure application, that is a part of your SDLC, but it does not in turn make an SDLC itself. So when we talk about, show us your SDLC, we're looking for the entire life cycle and not just how you develop, how you actually tactfully develop secure software, because at that phase of the application, we would have had to have been considerate of the requirements phase, we would have been considerate of the design phase, right? And when we get to the OWASP, we flirt a little bit with the design, but this is really kind of where the OWASP kicks in, right, in the testing. So the OWASP is typically a little bit later in the CW Top 25 or Top 100, or typically a little bit later, right, in your SDLC. So we need to make sure that we're considerate of those things, but understand that it's just a single part of an entire SDLC and not just the SDLC itself. Okay? So I want to talk a little bit about, regardless of what framework you're using, there are certain things that we need to look for. And your assessors should be looking for these things, right? And if you are looking and assessing your own environment to identify whether or not your organization has the necessary attributes, here are the things that we like to see. And when I see these things within your development lifecycle, it lets me to know that your organization has matured its development lifecycle. For the first thing that we need to look at is the primary analysis, right? This is where we ask ourselves, do our applications currently meet, if we can go back one slide, Jenna. if our applications currently meet our required needs. Then we go into the system analysis and requirements definitions, and this is the phase where we look at making sure that we capture how the application needs to function. Then we go into design, we go into development, right? We go to integration, the UAT, we go into testing. And one of the areas that we often see that applications and organizations really struggle is in this testing phase. Is that what we look for is that in the testing phase is that we go pull your requirements and we look to ensure that where you made a security requirement as part of your requirements phase, that the testing was actually executed to making sure that the application functioned against the requirements to ensure that it meets your security requirements. And then as part of that, we have the maintenance, which is just the ongoing daily care and feeding, evaluation, and then at the end of that process, we have the disposal, right, the end of life. Because remember, we want to make sure that when you get rid of the application, however that happens, we need to make sure that it happens securely. That might be just pulling the hard drive out and shredding it. There might be a lot of other things that are considered of ensuring that your application is end-of-lifed gracefully. Okay, let's go ahead and move forward. All right, so here we go with the actual elements of the things that we just talked about. The primary analysis, right, your organization should have this phase as part of your SDLC. You're going to be defining your objectives, your business objectives, your security requirements. This is really the requirements phase of the application. And it tells a story of what we need to accomplish. The application needs to function this way. We go through the systems analysis and requirements definition, right? We look to making sure, will our applications function this way? Are we currently capable of doing these things? Right. Where it does not, right, then we need to look to ensure that either when we're developing a new application or we're amending a current application. In the system design, this is where we're then designing our application to ensure that it meets our business goals and business needs, and those needs also being security and compliance. We look to ensure that within the system design that you have your standards as part of the SDLC, where we talked about the policies and procedures. We look to see that you have a clearly defined requirements, or not, sorry, requirements, but a very secure, consistent framework that you're using for defining those things, right? So we look to ensure that in the design phase, you would make sure that the application, that you're using a secure encryption methodology, that you're using secure communication protocols, and what those protocols and what those encryption algorithms would be, right? So you have the standards documentation as part of your SDLC that really comes into play as part of the system design. All right, let's go ahead and move forward. Now, in the development phase, this is really your real code is written here. What we see in most cases when we're auditing an organization is their SDLC kind of starts here, right? It doesn't address those other three phases. Now, during the development phase, what we're looking for is that your requirements in your design phase is taken into account here. And we often here will talk about that the OWASP or the CWE top 25 or top 100 or whatever security framework you're looking for. We're looking to ensure that your staff know how to develop secure code. We're also making sure as part of this is that when they're developing this code is that they're considerate of all of the business requirements that we captured and all of the things that we've done in the prior 2 to 3 steps of this. Now, the next part of this is integration testing. Now, a lot of times organizations don't have a UAT, user acceptance testing, and that's not really required from a security perspective. But if you look to integrate your application, you want to make sure that it's not going to implement or cause any security flaws in any of your architecture that you have pre-existing. Now, in the testing phase, understand that we're not just testing here for bugs, right? We're not just testing for the user experience. We should also be testing for security. And, well, you would ask, well, what are we going to be testing against? Well, you remember back in the beginning of this, we talked about the requirements phase and how we need to capture security requirements. when we're assessing an organization, we should be looking to ensure that the testing phase, we should be pulling your requirements and say, okay, show me the use cases and the test cases where you tested against your requirements, right? All of the security requirements that we need to see in place. Now, the maintenance phase is making sure that your application can be patched, right, that it can be updated. Because remember that the security posture of the industry changes from time to time. And so we're going to want to make sure that your organization has the capability and the ability to not only develop these secure applications, but you can maintain them in a secure way. You know, there's times I've gotten into an organization and asking them about their SDLC, and I'm tell me how you patch this application, and they're like, well, we don't patch it because we're afraid we're going to break it. Well, you know, how do you know that it's not secure? What are those things that you're doing for the daily care and feeding? Not just making sure that it's going to function right in a way that you expect to support your clients or to support your business needs, but also what are the things that you're doing? How do to ensure that the security of this application is ongoing. Okay, so let's go ahead and move forward. So now, as part of this, we talk about the evaluation, right? We want to make sure that as part of that testing phase, that all of that information gets fed back into the business owners, right? So because it's the business owners that ultimately we're doing all of these things for. So there needs to be this evaluation phase where we look for, did the application meet our expectations? Now, this particular phase is not really necessarily required from a security perspective, but it's really required from, the ownership and the business side of things. So we want to make sure that when the application is developed, if you're subject to a SOC or you're doing these things for your third parties, you want to make sure that there's some type of UAT, right, user acceptance testing, making sure that the application is going to absolutely function based on those original analysis that we did at the very beginning of the application or the development lifecycle. Now, the last part of this is disposal. Now, a lot of applications, they may be in play for 2 to 3 years, but understand that the code that you're writing to today, while the application as a whole might be in play for 2 to 3 years, it's how do we ensure that if we have to index this application or we have to update it or as part of the maintenance, how are we going to dispose of that application to making sure that it's done securely, right? So often we might have sensitive data sitting on hardware. We might have sensitive information sitting in the configuration of these files, right? We still want to make sure that when these applications are pulled offline that they're done so in a secure state. And this particular thing should also be considered not if you're just developing software, but if you're indexing software within your organization, even if you didn't develop it. As a given example, there's an organization years ago that I assessed, and we were talking about, they've got a brand new application that they've got in running that's been in play for a couple of years, and I asked them, well, what did you do with your legacy systems? And they said, we've got it literally sitting in this closet over here, and it's shut off and stored. And I'm like, okay, that's great. Let's go look at it. I want to physically put my eyes on it. And we went to the closet where it was supposed to be. The server wasn't there, or somebody had needed it about 6 months prior. They plugged it into the network and they turned it on. And so here's this incredibly insecure application running in their environment with loads and loads worth of client data that was susceptible to vulnerability. So understand that your disposal processes should be considered as part of your SDLC. Okay, let's go ahead and move forward. So in evaluating your SDLC, what are the things that you're going to want to ensure, right? You want to make sure that you have a full set of policies and procedures and standards that clearly define how we go about developing software in your environment, right? It's not just we use the OWASP as our SDLC. That is not an SDLC. So it's the policies and procedures, all of the training requirements, everything that's required to ensure that we maintain secure applications within your environment. We want to make sure that all of the policies and all of the procedures around your SDLC have been clearly communicated to all staff members who are a part of that, right? That everything from the people that are actually developing the software to the people that are actually using the software. So make sure that that you do have processes where the policies and procedures about the development and the life cycle and the maintenance and everything required as part of that SDLC is being done on a day-to-day basis securely. Now the next thing is, are we following our current project requirements? So you know, when you get into looking at your SDLC and you know you've got a defined set of this is how we go about doing things. One of the things that we do as assessors is we read your SDLC and we make sure that you provide us evidence to say that you're actually following your SDLC. Is it functioning as designed? Because short of that, you really don't have an SDLC, right? It's not documented. If it is documented and not followed, then it's just audit fodder. So when you're assessing your organization and making sure that you have all of the necessary attributes, you're going to want to put some hooks in there to making sure that you are assessing the practices that have been defined within your policies and procedures and standard to making sure that you're actually doing those things. Okay, let's go ahead and move forward. Now, we've kind of already talked about your secure development does not start actually in the development itself, right? It really starts in the requirements phases. And it's absolutely imperative that as part of your SDLC that we have security covered throughout the entire life cycle, not just we train our developers on how to secure software. Understand that without having the requirements phase, right, the design phase, without having all of the SDLC clearly laid out in terms of what are the phases within our life cycle of developing software, we need to include security. Chances are you're missing or there's parts and pieces that are being left on the table that may lead to compromise at a later time. Okay? All right, I want to spend some time if we have any questions around developing an SDLC and what are those things that we want to look for or what are those things that you need to consider. If you have any questions, now would be a good time to have those conversations.
You'll find the Q&A feature in your WebEx toolbar, so please send those in. This is the final session of our Compliance is Never Enough series, but the entire series is on our website, and you will receive this recording and a copy of the slides in your inbox probably sometime tomorrow. I can get that out to everybody. And be on the lookout for our next webinar series. It is going to be all about HITRUST, and our Chief Compliance Officer will be kind of walking through the HITRUST assessment process. It's going to be a really great 3-part series starting in June. So if you're interested in that, please be on the lookout for the registration links. Okay. Those will be coming sometime soon. So send in your questions. We'll give you guys a moment.
All right. I'd like to offer, here's my my email address for here at Kirkpatrick Price. I would welcome anybody that if you wanted to email me offline and have a conversation or just needed a sounding board about, you know, this is what we're doing, is this sound appropriate or this doesn't sound appropriate or what do you think about this? I'm more than happy to field those calls or those conversations in support of making sure that you're doing things in a way that's going to protect you from the nefarious people out in the world. So did we have any further questions in, Jenna?
Nothing's coming through right now. I think you covered everything.
All right. Well, I want to thank everybody for spending some time with me today, and this concludes the last of the 4-part series. We'll, after the HITRUST series that we're going to be putting forth, we'll be picking up some with additional topics. If there's anything that you would particularly like to hear about or any topics that you would like to be educated on, please take an opportunity to email me, and I'd be happy to put those things together for you. All right. Thank you, everybody, and have a wonderful day.